If we want to make things like social media less addictive to our kids, then we have to explain to them that it's a tool. It's a tool that we use, and there's a time to use it, and there's a time not to use it. And different tools we allow kids to have it at different ages. We throw this social media thing out there to our kids, and we just turn them loose with it. The most important thing in your kid's life is for you to be the biggest influence in their lives. And if you just throw them to the deep end of social media, what's going to happen? Social media is going to become the biggest influence in their life.
Superintendent, it's an honor to have you here today. We've got a series of questions for you that I'd like to ask you and get your insights on. We call it the Superintendent Spotlight. And these are parent questions that we have from across the country. And really, our goal here at smartsocial.com is essentially to help raise resilient kids in an area of technology, right? And they're all getting the same devices in every community, whether it's Northeast Texas or whether it's Arkansas or where I live in Los Angeles. Every community says we're a little different, Josh. Yes, you're right. But guess what? Your kids get the same devices as everybody else. They got an iPhone, an Android, an iPad, or anything else, YouTube and the Instagrams of the world and the TikToks. And so today's goal is to get your feedback and your insight as a superintendent to help us guide other districts. There's things you do really well, superintendent, and there's things others can learn from.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Clugston, Superintendent of Pine Tree ISD. We're located in Northeast Texas. We're about 100 miles east of the Dallas Metroplex. We're in a town of about 81,000, a school district of about 4,500 kids scattered over 6 campuses.
First, I want to get your feedback on disappearing messages. I've got a few of these to ask you. The first one, parents are asking us, what are the main risks and dangers associated with disappearing messages that parents should be aware of when they're talking with kids or when they're looking at their kids' phones?
Well, the biggest thing is you don't know who's on the other end. There's a lot of bad actors out there. And kids, they tend to be very trusting. And because they've grown up with technology, they're not near as reluctant to question things like we are because we're kind of technology immigrants. They're natives. And so to them, it's no different than talking to somebody in the town square. And so they have a lot more trust in people. And unfortunately, there's people out there that want to take advantage of that. So being able to monitor exactly who they're talking with and have some idea about what they're talking about is very important. I'm a father of 4 girls. The oldest is 30 and my youngest is in 8th grade. So I've watched this social media phenomenon kind of be born and build itself through the different levels of my kids at the different ages. And so, with my youngest, I'd say it's probably the scariest.
Yeah, excellent answer. Superintendent, the next question that parents have for us about disappearing messages is how can parents start a conversation with their child about the risks of using disappearing messages?
Well, when we're talking about disappearing messages and you're talking about those with your kids, to me, the big thing is kids will know why. They always want to ask why. I mean, I've been in the school business for 34 years, and every kid wants to know the rhyme and reason. They may not necessarily agree with it, but if they understand you're not just doing this because I want to be mean, if there's a rhyme and reason to it, they tend to accept it a lot better. And so it's just like us at the school. We have rules, and I always have a reason why. Because kids always say, "Why are we doing this?" Well, this is why. And like I say, they don't always agree with it, but they do understand it. And I think even when you're doing this, it's explain the dangers of how they could be exploited because they don't always know that. And so you've got to talk to them. I mean, share the full information with them. No, you're not talking to an adult, you're talking to a kid. But at the same time, they need to have all the information. They need to understand the dangers that exist. We're not trying to scare them, we're just trying to educate them.
Yeah, so true. You're getting buy-in from them. I absolutely love that. Superintendent, the next question that a lot of parents have for us is, do you have any examples of a possible situation where disappearing messages created an issue that may have impacted a student's life?
We've been very, very lucky in Pine Tree, and the disappearing messages really hasn't been a huge problem for us yet. It's been more of a problem between kids and the parents. It hasn't been a problem that has carried over to us near as much. I've had parents that have asked about, do you know anything that we can do? How do you address this? Because they all know that I have kids of my own, and they all know that I have a current 8th grader. And so to me, we've been pretty fortunate. There's not quite as many dangers, I guess, out in the rural areas away from the Metroplex areas of Texas, but it's still something that we have to educate our kids on because it could show up tomorrow.
Yeah, well said. Let's talk a little bit about screen time, Superintendent. What are your tips that parents can do to better manage screen time at home?
For me as a parent, my wife and I, like I said, we've raised 3 older daughters. We've got one that's in 8th grade. And so our kids have migrated through this with our oldest being 30 all the way down to Nevaeh, who is now 13. But for her, she's getting a phone at a junior high age, whereas my other kids probably didn't get a phone until they were a little older because that was kind of the norm. And so she's getting a phone a little earlier, but screen time and all the availability. I mean, we've got TV on the phone now. We've got everything under the sun you can all do on one device. And so for her, we do worry about screen time. So she's got limits on it. It's got a time it cuts off. If it's after that time, she has to request with us. And so she wants more time. She's got to make her case for it. And just like I want to explain why to her, she has to explain why to me. And I think that's really important because then we have an idea. And it also gives us that chance to have that discussion. Sometimes she'll come up and say, well, Dad, can I have another 30 minutes on my phone? I said, well, why don't you not do that when we watch a Halloween movie or something? So it just gives us that time to have interaction because they can get caught up in that just like we can get caught up in our work and our social media. And we just don't have a lot of conversation. Let's be honest. That's what our kids need.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent answer. I love that approach. You're building a rich dialogue. We like to remind all the parents watching this right now, superintendents, there is no safety app out there. Microsoft and Google is not going to wake up at 2 in the morning to help you with your kids, and you cannot outsource the safety of your kids to Uber or any of these transportation devices. The only safety app in the world that is going to save your child, that's going to wake up at 3 in the morning and go, something doesn't sound right, is going to be that rich dialogue that you have with your kids. Having that dialogue that the superintendent is talking about is the only thing that's going to say, you know what, I kind of know she was down today, and now she knows she can come to me or he can come to me based on what they saw on TikTok. Superintendent, I love that. Parents are often asking us, is social media positive or negative for my child? Such a great question. I want to get your feedback after this video on what some teens are telling us.
Part of what makes social media so addictive is how the algorithms are based on using content to judge whether or not someone's worthy, and using people's short attention spans to evaluate them as pieces of code, which also means that social media doesn't really care about your opinion, but really what keeps you on that platform longer, whether that's from likes, comments of engagement, sharing it to other people, or even just watching it through. The algorithm judges you as a piece of data and whether or not someone should be praised for being controversial or thrown away for not being exciting enough, even if they're pouring their heart and soul into the content. It is a heartless beast. When I spend too much time on social media, that can look like being happy because something really cool happened in my friend's life. They went hiking. A friend of mine saw snow for the first time a couple of days ago, and it can make me feel really happy and energized. But other times, it can just be really draining. It can be really negative. It depends who I'm following. It depends what's being posted.
Superintendent, we all know these things are addicting. This young woman said it's a heartless beast. What would be your advice to parents on how to open a dialogue talking about how to make these devices, these apps, less addictive?
Well, I think the biggest thing is knowing what it is. If we want to make things like social media less addictive to our kids, then we have to explain to them that it's a tool. It's a tool that we use, and there's a time to use it and there's a time not to use it. And different tools we allow kids to have it at different ages. I'm not going to give my 5-year-old a chainsaw. He may get the very dull handsaw, whereas my 16-year-old kid's probably going to start to learn how to use the chainsaw. And so I think social media is the same way. We throw this social media thing out there to our kids, and we just turn them loose with it. The most important thing in your kid's life is for you to be the biggest influence in their lives. And if you just throw them to the deep end of social media, what's going to happen? Social media is going to become the biggest influence in their lives. And you don't have a clue about half the stuff they're watching. So for us, we look at it as a tool, and there's a time and an age that we start to use it. But as we start to use it, we're using it as a tool until they can figure out how to control the tool. It's just like it's probably not a good idea to get your 16-year-old a Corvette. You're probably going to teach them how to drive as my dad did in the old Ford Pinto. And we start to learn that. And then eventually I may get the Camaro or something down the road, but he's taught me how to use the tool and how to use it properly. And the tool's not driving me, I'm driving the tool. And so it's the same with social media. It's no different than the other things that our kids have had available. It's just more available, and it's available to everyone. And I don't think parents take long enough to think about how do we take this tool and teach our kids how to use it properly, because otherwise it starts driving the ship, and that's not healthy.
I love what you said. I like how you're basically telling people without telling them a gradual introduction to tools, whether it's a chainsaw, which is a great analogy. Don't give your 5-year-old a chainsaw, but an older kid learns how to do the chores and clean up the backyard using a chainsaw of some sort. But we love the analogy of cars because nationwide, everybody uses them. And I love what you said. And we like to tell parents, start at the age of 10 teaching them essentially not distractive driving, but more assertive driving, and then also defensive driving, being calm. Because at the age of 10 in the backseat, they're learning from you, and then moving into how they eventually, by the age of 14, 15, are experts at the road without driving because they see their mom and dad doing it the right way. Love that.
And I think something else on that to remember is we're teaching those things. Of course, I've got 4 kids and 3 of them are married and have grandkids, but we've got like our group text, our family text. And so my youngest is in that group text. And so we joke around with each other and make comments and things of that nature. But she sees those and then she also gets to comment. But it also gives you a chance if they're saying things that may be inappropriate or something that they think is funny, but it's in a text. We don't get all the forms of communication that we get face to face. And so it's a teachable moment to say, hey, I think you probably meant that funny, but your sister didn't take that funny. It's a teachable moment. And it's much better to do that in a controlled environment that's where everybody in that is safe and loves her rather than throwing her out in social media and she makes that comment that never goes away.
Yeah. Yeah. Such wise advice. I love that. Another question that we get from parents a lot is what makes these apps so addictive? I'd love your insight on these 2 students that teach us all about the addiction that they've experienced.
I think the most addictive part about social media is the constant new content that you see. You're always being introduced to new content, especially on apps like TikTok. I think the short videos, when they end so quick, you start to lose your ability to have a longer attention span. I've caught myself finding long TikTok videos and I can't stand watching the whole thing.
This generation really adapted to the fact that we don't have a large attention span. We really only concentrate for 30 seconds. So getting information that quickly, I think, enables us to just want to keep watching more. You don't even need to care about what they're presenting to you, but just the fact that you can sit there and watch it and you're oddly enjoying it. Social media is pretty addictive. People said it's like a drug. So it is addictive because you can't stop watching it. Your mind just plays on loop and it enjoys the fulfillment of everything firing in your brain to just keep watching.
Superintendent, I'd like to get your insight on this. What would you tell teens about getting the opportunity or building up the strength to know when is enough to put their phone down and focus on something different?
Well, when we're talking about the addiction of social media, the people who build these platforms are not stupid. They watch human behavior and what connects people and what produces a dopamine rush and everything else. And there's so much information out there that our kids are used to have tons of information poured on them. And so social media feeds that because like the girl was talking about on there about the short videos playing and it was a new subject and a new subject and a new subject. And there's a ton of information. I catch myself when I sit there. I love to watch those little short reels and I'll find something that interests me and I'll scroll through the stuff that doesn't. And then they pour more of what I like to hear, the content I want to learn about. And that can be very addictive. So how do we get our kids to do that? And once again, it's about teaching them the priorities of what you have. It's no different than teaching a kid how not to procrastinate. It's easy for a kid to come home and back in my day and you turn on the cartoons, instead of doing your homework, you're over there watching cartoons or you're playing football out in the yard with the buddies instead of getting the homework done. Then mom and dad get home. That procrastination was something we had to be taught not to do. And so I think it's about, setting expectations with your kids and saying, here's the expectation. You want to take 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever that time is. That gives your time to go play on your phone, do whatever you want to do. But at this time, I need you doing this. So often today, I don't even think we're giving kids chores enough. We've got to give them some accountability because the world's going to hold them accountable in multitudes of ways. That's something we still do in school. There's a lot of accountability in school. I tell parents all the time, kids aren't successful because you put high expectations on them. They're successful because you teach them how to rise or exceed the expectations of others because the accountability in the world is going to be somebody else setting the expectation. And at school, we practice that. You get on the bus, it's a bus driver's expectation. You get it, come in the cafeteria, it's a cafeteria lady's expectations. You go to first period, it's the English teachers, the PE teachers, the art teachers' expectations. And so it's no different here. As a parent, you set the expectations for your kids and then it's their job to rise to meet those or exceed those expectations. And when they don't, there's accountability for that. And we teach them how to manage their time because if we don't, the time is going to manage them and whatever's going to manage them is whatever it is. The next big shiny thing. I think it was Andy Griffith talked about that in one of his episodes years ago. They'll latch on to the first shiny thing they see. Well, they will. We have to teach them how to manage that time and how to use it wisely. So I think it's real dangerous for a kid to get out there and watch a bunch of funny cat videos. No, not at all. But if he's doing that all day, we got a problem. It's no different than video games.
Yeah, so wise and so true. Superintendent, what is your advice to parents and students to avoid talking to strangers and avoiding dangerous situations online?
In order to make sure our kids don't get themselves in a bad situation because they're talking to unknown people online, talking to a stranger, we got to make sure that we have controls on who they're talking to. I don't want my kid talking to anybody online that I don't have any way to vet. I need to vet that person and know who it is. Because, like I say, there's too many bad actors out there. In a lot of the apps and even the video game apps, it's a chance to play with other players and things of that nature and have conversations as you're playing the game. But I need to know who the other person is. And so, if we do any of that, we're limiting that to friends, and it's got to be friends that we know who they are, so that we can properly vet that situation to make sure that it's a good situation. I don't need my 13-year-old daughter talking to some 45-year-old guy that I don't know. That's not a healthy situation, not unless I know that person. If it's my brother-in-law, then I don't have a problem with it. But I mean, I think that's just the biggest thing is so often we don't teach our kids and explain to the dangers that could exist in that because they don't know who's on the other end. They need to know who's on the other end.
Yeah, it's so true. So wise. Let's talk a little bit about video games. Superintendent, what is your advice to parents and teens about video game safety and managing video game screen time?
Managing screen time with a video game and the dangers that can exist in that, I think, are the same for any social media platform. It's one of those things you have to manage the time that they have available. There's nothing wrong with going out and playing video games, but you got to manage what it is. It's about teaching kids the time management, as we talked about. They've got to know what it is and what's going on. A lot of the big talk in video games is the amount of violence in video games. There's part of me, as somebody's been in this business for 34 years, I don't think that in itself drives kids to be more violent. I think the kid that doesn't have a lot of guidance and doesn't have a lot of love at home sometimes, and maybe even struggles with some emotional issues, I think it could have more of an effect on them. The more effect tends to be how often they're on it and how long they're on it. So I think if parents do a better job of really trying to manage the time that they use and know what games they're playing, even get in there and play the game with your kids so you have a better idea what the game is. I'm not much of a video gamer. My daughter will want to play some stuff. So I'm like, okay, well, let's get over here and show me how to play it. I'm usually terrible at it, but at least I have an idea of what the game is and kind of what we're doing. And I know whether there's any outside players playing. Do we know who these players are? How do you know who they are? And it just gives me a chance. And sometimes it's her teaching me, but it allows me to ask the questions and give the answers I need to know to make sure that, okay, is this something I want to do? Or is this something I really want to limit? Or, is this something, okay, we play this 20 minutes every day, probably not a big deal.
Yeah, very wise. Superintendent, what is your advice to parents about the impact of screen time when it comes to students being on screens too much and losing motivation because all they want to do is be on those screens? What would your advice to parents be?
To make sure that screen time doesn't become the driving factor in the kid, the one that's motivating them, is to really limit that screen time when they're little. I like my kids out in the yard and I like them playing. I've got 4 daughters, the youngest being 13, but I have 5 grandsons, and they're from 6 months old to 6 years old. And so they all love to grab the phone and watch a cartoon or maybe play a little game, but we limit that a great deal. We might play one game. Okay, let your brother play. Okay, your brother plays. Now let's go outside and play, because when it comes to Pop's house, we're going to be out in the backyard. And they're like, hey, Pop, can I have your phone? No, we're going out in the backyard. We're going to go out and play in the sandbox. We're going to get on the swings. We're going to get in the pool. That's one of the things we do. It's not all we do. And I think just really introducing them to a multitude of different things that they can enjoy. And a lot of times getting kids to enjoy it means you got to go out and do it with them. The phone has become such an easy way for parents when they're busy to hand a kid this, and that keeps them busy while they're doing the stuff they need to do. But my dad taught me a long time ago, and this is one of those things, if you want to raise a good dog, you got to spend a lot of time with that dog. My dad always said, he raised me and my 2 sisters all wound up pretty successful, but he said, it's not a whole lot different with kids. He said, if you want kids to be good kids and you want them to be successful, you have to teach them, and that means you got to spend time with them and show them how to do it. And so spending time with our kids, doing the things that they need to do, doing the things you need to do, which could be chores and things of that nature, but also doing the things that are fun to do. It is important for us to take that time with our kids. And it's an investment. And what we're investing in is their future.
100%. What a great answer. Superintendent, I want to thank you for coming out. Thank you to everyone who's watching right now. I want to give a quick shout out to my incredible team at Smart Social that helps school districts with 54 plus live parent events. What does that mean? We host weekly social media safety night events for parents with every question they have. It's on 12 incredible topics all year long, 450 resources. We also have teen-led video lessons because some of these are shown to teens and they're made by teens with teens using saw some of those videos here today. Those are excerpts from our program. We have a lot more, but our second thing is teen-led video lessons. And last, we have a premium parent newsletter that is off the charts successful because it's made by parents for parents with just the nuts and bolts you need to know about the dangerous apps, the dialogue starters, what you need to be aware of, and some positive ways to use technology as a family. Let's not say it's all evil. There's some good things. We call it shining online. Superintendent, thanks so much for joining us here today. I appreciate your time.
Enjoyed it. It's a big topic that I don't know that we discuss enough and discuss enough with parents, and especially young parents. I think it's very important for them to understand because the technology is not going away. So teach them to use it wisely.
Absolutely. Thank you, Superintendent. And thanks to all of our viewers. Remember to keep it light, bright, and polite, as the title of my book says, because your kids are watching what you're doing online. We'll see all of you on the next episode. Have a great rest of the day. Take care.